Welcome to the Modern American Library, a place of recollection and remembrance of the past and of the future. The time period being focused on in this exhibit of the museum will be pop culture in the 1950s, specifically on the topics of rock and roll and television. Not only did such forms of entertainment shape the decade, they also paved the way for a shift in society and its standards. World War II, which had ended in 1945, brought tremendous change politically and economically. Executive Order 8802 had prohibited discrimination in the defense industry, and African Americans were eager to gain full equality. Stalin and the Soviet Union, the threat of nuclear annihilation, and the possibility of communist infiltration were visible on the horizon. The Great Depression ended, and the consumer market flourished as people could once again afford consumer items. With the guidance of President Harry S. Truman, the country made the transition from wartime production back to civilian-related production. Socially, however, the country would also change, and that too rather drastically.
Rock and roll, a new form of music, was created with the turn of the century. It was a blend of the blues and gospel, which were both types of African American music. It was created in the mid-50s. During the war, 6 million African Americans had migrated from the South to the North and the West as factory jobs began seeking labor. Once war production ceased, they remained in the new cities and ghettos they had formed. Many enjoyed the sounds of rhythm and blues. Unfortunately, due to discrimination and segregation, many great artists could not broadcast their music. Finally, a disc jockey named Alan Freed played the rhythm and blues on a Cleveland radio station, resulting in a huge audience. Freed came up with the term rock and roll and is credited with coining this label.
This is yours truly, Alan Freed, welcoming you to the Big Beat once again.
Bing Crosby and Frank Sinatra had become icons of the past, as the children in the 50s took to rock and roll and its funky beat. Black artists did not enjoy much fame, though, and white artists such as Pat Boone, who tried to mimic the upbeat tones of rock and roll, simply took the life out of music. Producers began to look for a white icon who could captivate the public, or at least the masses of teenagers that were and would become born among the 75 million babies that constituted the baby boom. Finally, in 1953, a Memphis producer named Sam Phillips found the solution. Signed onto the stage, the national spotlight, the subject of controversy, and one of the most iconic personalities of all-time music history, Elvis Presley. Known by his adoring fans simply as Elvis, this 21-year-old sensation gained attention with his hair, his music, and his moves. By the mid-1950s, he appeared on the radio, television, and the silver screen. His sold-out shows were common, first after the release of Heartbreak Hotel in 1956, and especially after the release of Hound Dog in 1957, which was number 1 on the charts and remained in that spot for 11 weeks. His popularity was unimaginable. One woman recalls standing in line for 7 days and 7 nights to buy front row seats to one of his concerts. Another man remembered thinking his mother was going mad after seeing her scream wildly when Elvis appeared.
When on stage, Elvis was full of energy, strumming his guitar and singing along to the words of the song and performing very suggestive, controversial dance moves. Elvis was new and different, and teens certainly liked that. Suddenly, boys were spending their cash on high-waisted pants and collared shirts, and if it was within their budget, a leather jacket to match. The girls could be found buying a new record player and listening to their idol's dreamy voice at home, too. Their parents, however, were more horrified than amazed. They considered his fast-paced tunes to be the devil's music, as it was sexually provocative. The term Elvis pelvis referred to his infamous hip thrusting and gyrating when on stage and dancing. Ed Sullivan, the host of The Ed Sullivan Show, called Elvis's performances unfit for family viewing. In the end, Elvis's large audience would determine what was suitable. Soon after, he appeared on the rival Steve Allen Show and caused Allen to have more viewers than Sullivan. It was after then that Elvis performed 3 shows for Sullivan. In the first of these 3, when Elvis performed Love Me Tender and Don't Be Cruel, he was shot only from the waist up. Such censorship would become more commonly used as fear spread through the country, all for various reasons. Rock and roll became more and more widespread as the number of its occurrences grew. Bill Haley in his comments opened Blackboard Jungle with Rock Around the Clock, which also placed at the top of pop charts in 1955.
5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, rock. 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, rock, we're going to rock.
Elvis continued to draw in an immense crowd and anger a plethora of parents. He starred in numerous movies as well, including the well-known Jailhouse Rock. Though most notoriously known for his music, historians later came to realize what else Elvis symbolized. First, he represented the racial divide between whites and blacks that robbed the latter of opportunities and recognition. By finding Elvis, African American performers were disregarded yet again and continued to make music for only a black audience. Next, he transformed social standards by making the future adults of the country comfortable with certain taboo concepts in society, such as drugs, drinking, and sex. Most importantly, he and other rock and roll artists contributed to the formation of a new age group. No longer did a family connect over the same music and popular culture, and teenagers separated from the parents in efforts of creating a unique group that shared the same beliefs. This would forever change life in America.
But the musical industry was not the only one progressing along the decade. Television underwent many improvements and was found to be a great tool for marketing and commercial interests. When television finally came to America in the late 1940s, few could mask their fascination with what some dubbed the home screen. While black and white TV sets were scattered around the country, the radio was still the primary source of information, entertainment, and advertisements. Many saw their first telecasts at bars, and often tuned to an early filler of the schedule, professional wrestling. Only in heavily populated places was the relatively high cost of starting and operating a station considered economically viable. Big cities had substantial incomes and some fascination with what later became to be known as the new technologies. In 1950, mass national sponsors began to use TV over radio, as by then 8 million homes had TV. The next year, CBS broadcasted a color program, though it was only viewable in 12 homes. With the approval of the new RCA system by the FCC in 1953, however, color television started to become more accessible and popular. Television ownership, mostly black and white sets, boomed. The number of homes with TV increased from 0.4% in 1948 to 55.7% in 1954 and 83.2% in 1959. Though ABC, CBS, and NBC would be the only 3 networks available, broadcasters would find an enormous audience. It would be television that would shape the nation.
Then, in 1952, 20 million homes had televisions. Popular television shows at the time included suburban families like the Andersons in Father Knows Best and the Cleavers in Leave It to the Beaver. Another popular show was I Love Lucy, first broadcasted in 1951, featuring Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball. It allowed Americans to laugh and have a good time, even in isolated countryside areas in the South. In the show, the 2 main characters had faced problems all married couples did, making the show relatable. In this way, television assisted in reinventing the white middle-class culture. Some other popular shows included The Ed Sullivan Show, which started in 1951. The well-known Tonight Show, starring Steve Allen, would begin in 1954, and although at first limited to viewers in New York, it became a sensational hit. 1956 brought 21, a popular game show in which contestants try to use their wits to beat their opponents to a point value of 21. This show would come to an end, however, when the show's most famous contestant, Charles Van Doren, was found to have rigged the game. Movies would also be shown on TV, such as Wizard of Oz in 1957. Towards the end of the decade, in 1959, The Twilight Zone would premiere.
Science fiction shows also emerged during this time as people craved for impossible, filled with drama, suspense, comedy, and action. The 1950s was the classic era of science fiction theater. In 1952, Adventures of Superman hit the air, featuring George Reeves as Clark Kent, a reporter who transforms into a superhero to save the day. 1954 brought Flash Gordon, starring Steve Holland, and told the story of a superhero fighting foes from outer space to keep the world from danger. Science fiction encouraged the younger generation to imagine and be curious, but always just consider it a story. Additionally, the Nat King Cole Show on NBC rose to fame. Its first broadcast was on November 5, 1956. However, it was never sponsored, as national corporations were afraid that the show featuring a black person would hurt their sales among whites. Its last broadcast was on December 17, 1957, lasting a little over a year. A show with a black performer was not introduced till a decade later.
Broadcasters made sure to draw in viewers of all ages. This included the growing groups of children provided by the baby boom. One of the first kids' television shows, shown in 1955, was Disneyland's Davy Crockett miniseries, which featured the adventures of a brave frontiersman, played by Fez Parker. Children sat seemingly endlessly in front of the screen, eager to know whether Crockett indeed would triumph in the end. His trademark coonskin cap was a common sight among young boys, to whom he was a hero. Davy Crockett lunchboxes, bubblegum cards, and other merchandise lined store shelves, and by 1955, Americans had spent $300 million buying such products. The first animated cartoon series, Mighty Mouse Playhouse, was shown on CBS in 1955. Starring the superhero Mighty Mouse, this show entertained children for hours on end. That same year, Sam and Friends premiered, featuring Jim Henson and his two puppets. This show would later become The Muppets. Bozo the Clown also became famous in 1956, and with the result of a huge success when asked to come in for the kids at McDonald's, became the face of the company.
During this time, consumer consumption had peaked at a historically high level. The products sold on TV had defined the 1950s. There were ads for TV dinners, detergent, kitchen appliances, and cars. Popular animated figures such as Speedy Alka-Seltzer entered TV viewers. The industry also endorsed celebrity endorsements such as Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, who promoted their sponsor cigarettes, and Frank Sinatra sang about shampoo. There were even TV cowboys to promote breakfast cereals, and as a result of the baby boom, many toys such as Mr. Potato Head, the Barbie, hula hoops, and frisbees received televised advertising.
This upsurge in television production created a change in consumer culture. After decades of scarcity and rationing, Americans had what seemed an exciting array of consumer goods to choose from, and television helped advertise those products. Total U.S. billings doubled during the 1950s, from $5.7 billion in 1950 to $12 billion in 1960.
Important domestic and foreign events began being projected on televisions for average American families to view. During the grand opening ceremony of the American National Exhibition in Moscow, Vice President Richard Nixon and Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev engaged in a heated debate about capitalism and communism in the middle of a model kitchen set up for the fair. This so-called kitchen debate became one of the most famous episodes of the Cold War. When Nixon demonstrated some new American color television sets at the American National Exhibition, the Soviet leader sneered at the display, claiming they would have similar technology in a few years. They were standing before a new color television camera at the Ampex Corporation booth. News was originally received at the local movie theater, where newsreels would update the public on current events. That changed with the incoming of news shows on TV. In 1952, NBC started the Today Show, which would become the longest-running network morning show. The CBS Evening News, which had been running since 1948, gained viewers as TV sales rose. The 1960 presidential debate was also broadcasted on TV and demonstrated the power of mass media, as people were not only hearing the candidates, but also seeing them. Kennedy's appearance and behavior were portrayed better than that of Nixon and led to his victory in the elections.
This is popular culture in the 1950s. This is what defined social standards, and this is what made America what it is today. From Elvis to I Love Lucy, and from presidential debates to Mighty Mouse Playhouse, the 1950s proved to be a significant time in American history.
Exits can be found in the back of the theater. Please exit in an orderly fashion as to avoid injury. Please make sure you have all your belongings with you. Stairwells are found directly outside the door, and elevators can be found to the left. The Modern American Library gift shop can be found at the end of the exhibit, directly outside the lobby. Have a wonderful time at the Modern American Library.